politics and above religion, a moral authority exists known globally as the Ageless wisdom. It is the study of consciousness, the mystery of awareness, which cannot be measured, yet will not be denied. Stay tuned as we explore consciousness, the fundamental nature of reality. Welcome to the Ageless Wisdom Mystery School with Michael Benner.
Thanks for joining us. This is the Ageless Wisdom Mystery School on KPFK in Los Angeles. My name's Michael Benner. I missed you last week. We were preempted for a special fund drive, and I want to thank Christine Blasdale for doing that, and thank each of you for your financial support of this radio station. We are obviously commercial free. You probably know, if not, you should know that this group of radio stations, Pacifica, 5 radio stations in total, KPFK in LA, we have a station in Berkeley, and then there's Washington, D.C., New York City, and Houston, came out of a ban the bomb mentality in the late 40s after World War II, hence the name Pacifica, but also invented the idea of listener-supported non-commercial radio. This was long before there was any, PBS, public broadcasting, or public radio, so to speak, educational radio. And there's no confusing this with NPR, I don't think, because we're much more radical and we don't take any corporate underwriting. We'd like to keep it that way, but we need your support to do that. In other words, not only are we non-commercial, we don't accept any corporate sponsoring of any kind, so that we're free editorially to say and do whatever we want, especially if it's unpopular. Where else are you going to go to get this broad diversity of opinion? Yes, all progressive, but nevertheless very diverse. And that's what I love about KPFK, and I presume you do too. So thanks for listening, and thanks for supporting the station. And during the fund drive, if you could kick in a few bucks, we'd really appreciate it. There are some wonderful station-wide premiums for $100, $150 as an annual contribution. A contribution as small as $25 per year makes you a voting member of KPFK. That means you can elect people for the local station board. We're very democratic and run by our listeners, owned by people like you. It's your radio station, especially when you make a tax-deductible contribution. And I like the Sustainer Circle. I'll talk more about this at the end of the show, but this is a way you can make a much smaller contribution of $15 or $20, $25, $50 a month. And that's just pulled right out of whatever account you'd like it to be removed from. It'll show up on your monthly statement, of course, and it is tax deductible. And so all you have to do is point your browser to kpfk.org. We do have phone rooms. You could call 818-985-5735, but we've had to subcontract that out due to COVID. So it's sort of a clunky way, if I can admit it, to make your contribution. I think it's so much easier and more elegant just to go to the website, kpfk.org, and poke around in there. Look for Sustainer Circle. Check out the different premiums and thank you gifts. But the main reason you make your contribution is to keep us on the air and make sure we're commercial free. So that's my plug. Again, I'll mention it again at the end of the hour. But I'm really excited and anxious to get into our program today. I'm talking to a fellow that I've interviewed before, most recently about a little over a year ago. We had Chuck Hillig on this program, and so we're going to reprise that show today and talk about consciousness and non-duality and what does it mean to be aware. And gosh, maybe even what is reality? What does it mean that something is real? when we hear, especially in Eastern philosophy, all things are an illusion or a delusion, what in the world are they talking about? So I told Chuck we'd just jump into the shallow end of the pool and splash around a bit today and see what we can come up with. I first met this man in what must have been the early 1980s. And I interviewed him on a talk show over at KLOS, the ABC station here in LA. We were both young men, and Chuck had a wonderful book. And I think, Chuck, you were a practicing psychotherapist in those days. Is that right?
Yes, I was. I was living in Ojai, and I was licensed. And yeah, you got it right.
And since then, you've written how many books? Have you kept track?
Well, 5 books are currently out, and they're available on Amazon. And they've been published in, I think, 6 or 7 languages now. I'm just really happy to have them out there, and people email me and contact me from different parts of the world, to have a discussion or just even set up a chat with me concerning something that had been triggered by something that I had written in one of my books. So I'm happy to have those kinds of conversations.
That's great. I was thinking just the other day about the continuity of my interest in hypnosis as a teenager, really, and transmediumship, having read Edgar Cayce books and Jane Roberts books when I was in college. And then my study of hypnosis led to so-called mind science, to science of mind, and general interest in metaphysics, and then Eastern philosophy, and just how that's unfolded in my life. And here I am all these years later, even more fascinated than ever by the nature of consciousness, doing a radio program that focuses on the study of consciousness, and such a fascinating and yet elusive subject. How did you, as a psychotherapist, become interested in philosophy, and especially the esoteric philosophies?
Well, I became interested before I was a therapist. I had been born and raised as a Catholic, and had done, the Catholic grade school, the Catholic high school, the Catholic university with the Jesuits. I had done all of that, and when I was about 21 or 22, I began to have like a shift inside me where I was not feeling satisfied. My heart was not satisfied by the answers that I was getting from my professors. And I began to slowly withdraw from connection with the Catholic Church. And I wandered figuratively for about 3 years through some kind of spiritual wasteland and didn't know quite what or how to define my connection with something that was otherworldly. And then, as serendipity often has, it interjected and showed a friend of mine suggested that I read Siddhartha, which I'm sure you've read and are familiar with, and most of your listeners would be. And Siddhartha really changed my life. I was like water on parched earth. I was going, where has this stuff been? And I started to read everything I could on Buddhism and Hinduism and Taoism and Zen, and finally went back to Taoism, and eventually around 1970, I found myself fascinated by and drawn to the books that had been written about Ramana Maharshi. And when I started to read like talks with Ramana Maharshi, it was just like, where else can I go? This is it. There's no place else. The search is over. I'm not going to move beyond this, because this seems to be such a kernel or a core of truth for me that I felt satisfied in just resting in what he was pointing at and what he was showing. So that I've been really again, figuratively, at the feet of Ramana Maharshi for more than 50 years now.
If I'm not mistaken, I seem to recall seeing a picture of Ramana Maharshi with Albert Einstein. Could that be?
Well, I remember seeing a picture of him with Paramahansa Yogananda.
Ah.
And Carl Jung had something very wonderful to say about Maharshi. He said something about, and I know I'm misquoting this, but he said in the white space that India is, the whitest of the white space is Maharshi. And Mahatma Gandhi, my understanding is, used to send his staff for kind of a spiritual R&R when they got burned out about, in the late 40s and the mid 40s, to actually send them to the ashram to hang out with Maharshi for a bit before they pulled themselves or had to go back and get involved in the affairs of the world and what Gandhi was trying to do.
I think as Westerners, when we look at these great teachers, these gurus in the East, we often view them in a religious context. We may ask, are they Buddhists or are they Hindu? As if Hindu is a single religion, right? Hinduism, like Christianity, it's thousands of variations. But a lot of these guys are, I guess, Vedantists, aren't they? Doesn't it go back more to the culture of these ancient books like the Upanishads or the Bhagavad Gita? And they really, guys like Vivekananda or more recently Nisargadatta and others, Paramahansa Yogananda, I don't think of them really so much as religious teachers as philosophers. What's your take on that?
Well, I have a take that maybe will come as a surprise, but maybe the best way of describing it is, as long as you think that they were real people, that Ramana Maharshi was a person, that Buddha was a person, that increases the odds enormously that you're going to think that you too are also a real person. But they weren't, and you're not either. They have their origin, they meaning Christ and Buddha and Maharshi and Nisargadatta Maharaj and all of them, all of these great spiritual luminaries have their origin and their source from within the heart of hearts of who you are. You have brought them forth from your own heart. They are manifestations that you have created and put on the stage of the world that you call your life, that you're walking through right now. You've peopled the stage of your life with these spiritual luminaries in order to enlighten you, to upset you, to point out things, but you sprinkled them around, but they have their origin within you, and part of what I point out is that you have to own that. You have to own that you are doing that they're coming from you, because if you start, or whenever you try to separate yourself and say they are different than me, they are higher than me on the spiritual ladder, and I need to, work really hard and stress and strain and climb up this spiritual ladder, and maybe I can, kind of get close to them in some way, maybe to Maharshi or maybe even Buddha or Christ beyond that. But that whole way of looking at it stratifies it when it's not stratified at all. There is no ladder at all. There's no place that you have to get to. There's nobody lower than you, like Putin or Hitler or anybody else, and there's nobody above you like Maharshi or Buddha or Christ. You are the very consciousness that you're seeking. You are that. And you're, part of the dance is pretending like you're not that. But all of that is contained within you, and there's nothing that you have to do, nothing that you have to learn, nothing that you have to study or pray to or meditate on in order to be able to be who you actually are. You can't become more of what you actually are. You are consciousness itself, and there's just, it's like end of story. What else is there?
If there is no achievement or attainment in this regard, and nothing that we need to do, maybe it's something we need to stop doing.
Yes, but it's very difficult for the ego to stop doing it. The ego wants to be on its way to someplace else. It wants the mind will never be enlightened. The mind always wants to go to a place where it can become satisfied or sanctified or perhaps made more whole. But it's this movement, and the movement is justified by the ego making what is and what's present not as okay as what's not present, what is missing. So it's always around the corner someplace. It's always down the block or on the other side of the earth or in this ashram or in this book or at the feet of this master. That's where the answer is. So the ego wants to go from what is to what isn't. And that very separation feeds into the delusion that separation does in fact exist, because you're not going to go to a place where you already are. You have to pretend that you're not over there and that you need to go there in order to be okay and sanctified and enlightened and in some way enhanced.
I recently, in an interview on this show, in fact, recently talked to a fellow who told me about a phenomenon I had never heard of before, that when people are shown two pictures, even if they don't seem to be related, that it's inherent in the mind to begin to weave a narrative to connect those two pictures. And that his point was that we do that with our lives. And we've heard this before, but he just seemed to have a deeper or broader understanding of it, that our lives are a story that we're telling ourselves, and largely a story of victimhood and victimization and what's been done to us, and searching for sympathy in our relationships with other people and understanding about what a struggle my life has been, when in fact I'm the storyteller.
Yeah, I know. But that is true. It's almost like your spiritual awareness can't really flourish until you give up the never-ending, repetitive kind of story that you tell yourself about how you are right and about how other people have wronged you in some way. So until that gets resolved, comfortably enough, you'll be engaged in and entangled with and entrapped by and attached to the story, and you'll stick to that story because that becomes like the framework or the Christmas tree upon which you hang the ornaments of who you think you are. Your thoughts, your feelings, I did this, I have this, these fears, all that stuff kind of surrounds you and covers this framework. But the framework is just exactly that.
We do live in a world that we have to manage. I mean, rising up out of this story that we tell ourselves is the requirement to feed ourselves, to have access to water and shelter, and certainly many of us are excessive in our desires for material things, but nevertheless, there's always going to be some demand. You have to eat, you have to in a modern world, there's bills you have to pay every 30 days. So
Sure.
sometimes I think of that phrase, I don't know who gets credit for it, that we need to live in the world, but not of it. So is that a kind of a middle way? Is that a walk that we have to do to find a balance between the appearance of reality in 3 dimensions in time, the illusions that we're talking about in the stories we tell, balancing that with the reality of an eternal moment and existence beyond space and time?
Yeah, I think a balance can be reached through, certainly not through attachment, because attachment is the entranceway to suffering. So we're talking about non-attachment. And non-attachment then speaks to what you were pointing at, Michael, that you're in the world, but you're not of it. You're involved with it, 100% involved, not saying, oh, I'm much too spiritual to be have to do with this or have to do with that. No, to be involved with the drama, to be an appreciative audience to your own stuff that you created. You own your own dream. You own it. You say, somehow this is I'm creating this, and I'm going to involve myself in this. I'm not going to remove myself from it. I'm going to immerse myself in it. And in my willingness to immerse myself in it, I'm honoring it. I'm honoring the dream. I'm honoring the dance of me doing that.
Let's talk about attachment and non-attachment as opposed to detachment.
Right. Yeah.
What that means in a practical sense. I have to take a short break, and then we'll come right back. My guest is Chuck Hillig. He's an author, psychotherapist, philosopher, and dare I say, proudly a friend of mine. And it's great chatting with him. Stick around. We've got more on the nature of consciousness and what is attachment. We'll talk about non-duality, too. What in the world is meant by the non-dual nature of reality? Stick with us. This is the Mystery School on KPFK. Chuck Hillig is my guest today from the East Coast. You're in Virginia, aren't you?
I am. I'm about 15 miles west of Fredericksburg. And Fredericksburg is about halfway between D.C. and Richmond.
So is that Northern Virginia?
Yeah, it's considered Northern Virginia, right. I'm about 65 miles southwest of D.C.
I see. That's not so far from Washington. Well, it's beautiful country, and I know you're very familiar with Southern California. You said you lived in Ojai for a while. And
oh, yeah. Long time. Maybe 37 years in California totally. And I think I was in Ojai at least 30 of them.
How has Ojai come to be such a metaphysical center? I know that there's that wonderful library. It like exists in another dimension up there, that Crotona library. There's Krishnamurti's place up there, what is it, Mount Meditation Mount. And it just seems to be such a metaphysical spiritual community. Do you have any idea how that came about?
No, I really don't. I've been fascinated by why so many spiritually minded people seem to be drawn into that valley. There's such a concentration of them. Some of them are pretty far out. We've had some strange kinds that have shown up there, including, do you remember Marshall Applegate?
No.
Well, he was one of those people that they did this. He had about 8 or 10 of his minions commit suicide down around San Diego.
I do remember that. Yeah.
So he came through recruiting people in the valley. He thought that this was rather fertile land and a landscape for him to find, followers. I don't know if he caught any in his web at that point, but yeah, he was one of the ones that showed up here. But we have many, many others that come and go and come and go.
Yeah, I associate him with San Diego, and that was the cult that was going to meet the spaceship that was hidden on the other side of the moon. And
Heaven's Gate.
Yeah,
I think.
there you go. There you go.
Right.
My God. Well, let's go back to this. I teased going into the break this idea of talking about attachment, non-attachment, detachment. This comes up a lot in the spiritual studies. What are we talking about here, Chuck?
Well, my take on the attachment, when the ego becomes attached to something, that is when the control and the desire and the suffering shows up. When the lens of that is focused through that negativity that arises with it, the suffering always is there, because the ego is the one who wants to suffer, as you pointed out. It's just like it gets its validation more through the pain of something, even more so than it does through its successful completion of a desire. So it becomes validated, and the prime directive of an ego is to survive at all cost. It has to survive. And it discovers quite early on that the pain of not getting something, or of having somebody inflict something upon them, is more validating, really, as the ego wants to stay separate than it does when it succeeds in something, when something's easy and that's successful. It wants to feel the other, and there's no better and quicker way to feel the other than to get slapped, in a sense, to get a sense of, well, I'm over here and they're over there and they're doing this to me, or I wanted this and I didn't get this, and there's pain because of the suffering of it. So it's an interesting dynamic, and I think it really explains a lot of how people are in a lot of ways. They're looking for that sense of the other, and you can get that sense more so, like I said, with something that you're pushing away than you can with something that you've actually succeeded in getting.
It's so ironic that the ego, or the persona nature, this identity that we've cobbled together in an attempt to get attention and acknowledgement and appreciation and acceptance from other people, creates the sense of I'm not enough, creates the desire, but it's never fulfilled, because either we don't get what we want, or we get what we thought we wanted, but then we decided or realized that we didn't really want that, or it came with strings attached. Or we got it, but it's the wrong color, the wrong shape, the wrong size. I planted beefsteak tomatoes, I thought, and I got cherry tomatoes, and now I'm disappointed. Hell, you still got tomatoes, So it doesn't look like what I thought it would look like. And then, damn it, even when we do get what we want, it doesn't last.
No, it's very evanescent. It just kind of vanishes. It's very impermanent, because that's part of it. It's almost like the image that I get is like running downhill. You have to keep on going for more and more and more and more. And if you don't have something to go for and to either succeed or fail at getting, there's a sense of emptiness, a sense of non-purpose. Like, what do I do now? So people, create these kinds of places to seek out, whether it be internally or externally, in the thoughts that somehow that's going to make them happy. But nothing is going to make them happy because happiness is not all it's cracked up to be. Happiness comes and goes. What you're really more interested in at a deep level is not so much the happiness, it's to live in a state of constant joy. And in that joy, you can be both happy and unhappy. But if both of those are contained with a sense of joy around them, then, hey, so it's raining on my parade, or, I planned for this and it didn't work out. You can still be joyful. You can be happy, or whatever, but the joy is kind of constant. And because happiness comes and goes, by nature, it's very transitory, and it changes constantly. And it's now you see it, now you don't. But people have this idea, especially about therapy, that therapy is supposed to somehow make them happy. And it's not about making them happy at all. Sometimes people are very surprised and almost shocked when I remind them about that. I said, no, therapy is not about making you happy. It's about creating a safe enough space for you to really look at who and how you are, and to face the truth about that, and to embrace yourself, warts and all, in the wonderfulness of who you are. But the total radical acceptance and embracing of what is, that's the goal of therapy. It's not to be happy, because happiness, like I said, it's comes and goes. You got a new raise, and then you had an accident in the car on the way home. Not to be attached to that.
We hear a lot about the idea of unconditional love. I'm not sure that it comes easily or logically that unconditional love is unconditional whatever is happening.
Yeah.
It's to be unconditional in, gosh, I feel sad. Let me feel my sadness fully and completely. Gosh, I'm confused. Let me embrace the confusion and let it have its way with me.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And so a lot of attachment, it seems to me, and I guess this is a problem with language and labeling, is when we try to push something away, we're actually holding on to the very thing we're trying to avoid.
Yeah, it's funny how that works, that when something wonderful is happening for us and we try to cling to it in the hopes that it'll stay longer, the tendency is that it starts to slip away faster. And conversely, when something is really not very comfortable at all, in our very attempt to push that away and to deny its space and to say, no, you cannot be in my life at this time, and our unwillingness just to be with what is, and our unwillingness to do that, oftentimes makes it just want to hang around longer.
I see this with my pets. I learned early on, whether it's a cat or a dog, and I want to cuddle it, and it gets uncomfortable. If I hold on, because I want what I want, when it does get away, it's less likely to come back. But if it lets me know it wants me to let go and put it down, if I do that immediately, it sticks around. It's more likely to come back and hang around. Gosh, that whole idea of letting go, of refusing to attach, to be, again, not detached, because that sounds like we're just oblivious, but
right. This
level of non-attachment seems to me if something is real, you don't have to hold on to it.
No, you don't. And when you talk about letting go, there's no reason to let go if you haven't clung to it to begin with.
Obviously, yeah.
If you experience life like you're putting your hand into a fast flowing stream, not with a closed fist, but with your fingers splayed out, and let the water just pulse right on through it. And you feel that. You feel the power of the river. That seems to be a better way of experiencing the river, as opposed to try to enclose your fist around it and capture it in some way, because you just want it to do what you want to do. But that's the ego again. And the ego is really, it's like it's a point of view that's fallen in love with itself in a lot of ways. It's just something that wants to assume that it is the thinker, that it is the feeler, it is the speaker of these words, it's the doer of these actions. It wants to take credit for that. But all of those things, the thoughts and the feelings and the words and the actions, they're in a sense happening all upstream of you. They're happening upstream, and the upstream is really consciousness itself. All of these things are being experienced and originated by consciousness. And you are just the instrument of those things being expressed at this moment in space and time. You are the puppet, in a sense. You are reading these lines. These lines are not being originated by you. You may think and believe that you are improvising and everybody's just making this up as they go along. That may not be the case. You may be living into a script that you've already chosen and created, and you're just living it. And everybody's a hell of a good actor because it sounds like they're reading it for the very first time. That may not be the case. Maharishi used to say everything is predestined. Everything is, there is no such thing as free will. Free will is illusory.
Wow, there's just so many different places I can go with you on this. I want to pursue this idea of non-attachment and acceptance connected to the philosophy, the Eastern, largely an Eastern philosophy of acceptance. I think Westerners find this abhorrent. We have this manifest destiny idea. Napoleon famously said, circumstances, what are circumstances? I create circumstances, as if you're either the creator or the victim. In fact, it's a dance, I think. It's more of the middle way when it comes to acceptance. I like to think of it as where I begin, not where I end. And so a student might say, well, the way you guys are talking, then what's the point of me setting a goal if I am to not be attached to an outcome? If I'm supposed to accept things exactly as they are, why would I set a goal? And I wonder how you would answer that. My tendency is to say it's important to set goals, just not to be attached to a particular outcome.
Right.
How would you answer that?
No, I mean, I would agree with that. Yeah, you can set as many goals as you want. You can. It's the attachment to having a particular set of results show up that triggers the suffering, really, because then you say, I know what should, quote unquote, should be happening, and if it doesn't unfold or unravel quite like that, then I'm going to be upset about it. But it has nothing to do with you. You are just, in a sense, reading a part. I mean, let me ask you a question, Michael. You've seen Romeo and Juliet. Now, did Romeo and Juliet, do they have free will? Can they, for example, choose to not kill themselves at the end of the play?
I've never thought about it. I mean, my reflexive response would be, of course they have free will. They're totally responsible for their choices, but that would be followed quickly by my mind saying, but their choices are limited. There are many more choices, variations or permutations they may not be aware of. So I've always had a problem with the idea that there is no free will, that everything is predestined. So Help me out with that. Tell me a little more about that.
Well, it's not something that it flies in the face of reason and logic. It just does not seem to be that way. And yet, if you live into just say, I'm just going to embrace the possibility that that's what's going on, then that relieves you of, and everybody else, why blame anybody for anything?
Well, yeah, I certainly, I certainly appreciate that. Buddha said, ostensibly, reportedly, if someone shoots you with an arrow and you obsess on how angry you are at that person for shooting you with the arrow, perhaps you should attend to the fact that there's still an arrow sticking out of your body.
Yeah.
So we obsess on the external. We're back to this idea of playing victim. And I guess my sense of life in form is that there are certain parameters or brackets or, boundaries, perhaps a better word, within which I have free will. But it's sort of like throwing a bowling ball. There's this gutter and that gutter, and I'm trying to stay down the middle and knock down a few pins and not end up in the gutter. So I think I have a mission that I don't fully understand or appreciate, and certain things I need to accomplish as a soul, as a spiritual being, in form. I have a vague sense of what they are. I aspire to be a virtuous person. I know others benefit from that, and I benefit from that. But the particulars is where I get hung up. Like, how do I go about doing all of that? Again, I don't think it's enough. I know it's not enough for me to find a cave high in the Himalayas and meditate my life away. I enjoy rock and roll and dancing and singing and playing and good food and fun. And I want to be in the world. I just don't want to be corrupted by it. And that's a challenge.
Well, do you think that you can be corrupted? Can anybody be corrupted? Or if we're all just playing a part, then so if you can put it this way, the universal cosmic author loves his villains every bit as much as he loves his heroes.
That is a step back for me.
How?
The idea that God does not struggle, God is not a goodness that struggles with evil or wickedness, but incorporates it into the bigger plan.
Yeah.
That light has no meaning without shadow. That there has to be the yin and the yang.
Well, yeah, the blackness needs the white in order to make it more bearable, and the white needs the blackness in order to make it more interesting.
I've said to people, and it always creates a really confusing conversation, if God hated the devil, why did he hire him to run hell for him?
Yeah.
Because if the devil were in charge of hell, it certainly would be a festival of depravity, not a place of punishment. He's obviously working for God, given the myths and the stories that are handed down to us. And yet, this rarely seems to occur to anybody that God and the devil are working hand in hand as we project our. Now we're approaching this duality of things, the gender, the polarities, the light and the shadow of things, and I promised we'd touch on duality and non-duality, and you've spoken at these conferences on non-duality. Why don't you give us a little bit on that? What does that mean, non-duality?
Well, the world that you live in is dualistic. I mean, even words are dualistic. You identify as being a body. You say, this is what I am. And part of that is you say, I am my thoughts, I am my feelings, I am my words, I am my actions, I am my body, I'm my opinions and my beliefs and my expectations, all of these things I am. And then to contrast that, you have to have something that you are also equally identifying as not you. So there's the you, or, the saying, there's the I over here, and then there's the not I, which is over there. That's everything else in the world. And the friction that arises between those is what creates that dream world. But it's interesting because the outline of who you say you are is actually the same as the inline of everything that you say you are not.
Is this the same as Descartes? Is it the subject-object split? Are those just other ways of talking about duality?
Well, everything that you talk about is dualistic. You cannot talk about non-dualistic stuff, because in order to do that, you use words which, like I pointed out, are very dualistic to begin with. You can kind of point to an emptiness and say, go look over there and see what's there and what, but it's not going to be here. It's not going to be in the words. At best, you can describe it possibly as it's contained in the space between the words. It's in that emptiness, that silence that's between each and every sound. That's what's true. The rest of it is this noisy stuff that shows up. It's fascinating. It's brilliant. It's staggeringly beautiful in many ways. But it's not, it masks the great emptiness, the great void, the great silence that is always present all the time, 100%. Consciousness is always fully present for you. It's not, there's not some of it here and then some of it around the corner or down the block or on the other side of the earth or on the other side of the galaxy. There's not a separation of consciousness at all. Everything is quintessentially only one.
So separation is the illusion here. That's really the boogeyman, is the idea that there's something called that, which is not this.
But that's where the ego comes in. The ego wants it to say, I am over here. And in order for it to say, I am over here, it has to point to you over there, saying, you're over there, I'm over here. There's a difference. There's a separation. And from that initial split, which is non-existent, it's like trying to, separate characters on a movie screen. Where does John Wayne stop and where does the heroine over here begin? It's all part of the same thing. But it's that belief, that illusion that there is a separation that really animates the whole dream world and creates the dramas that we immerse ourselves into.
Yeah, whenever I contemplate this enormously large question of separation, I remind myself that it's fear in its many forms, countless forms, that divides and promotes this illusion of separation, and love that unites. But love to most people is just a feeling. It's only recently, you were talking about joy, only recently that I saw the word joy in the word enjoy and rejoice.
Yeah.
And there it was staring me in the face, but no one ever taught me about joy.
Yeah.
They told me my teeth needed to be whiter and my breath was bad and I needed this deodorant for my underarms and all this fear that advertisers and the power brokers in the world put on us. And you take these joyous children, happy for no reason, put them in school and begin to scare the bejesus out of them, and all of our problems are born from the separation and the illusions of separateness. And hopefully people are getting so disgusted with the polarization and the binary divisions in society, that they'll look for that third element. What is it that bridges this, that ameliorates and transcends this idea of this or that? How can we make it a you and me world instead of a you or me world? Chuck, I really appreciate you being with us this afternoon. And as we mentioned earlier, you've got a half a dozen books. And why don't you tell folks your website, and so they can follow up, find out which of your books they want to read first.
Well, you can contact me at my website, which is Chuck Hillig, ChuckHillig.com. And I'm also very, very active on Facebook. You can friend me, and you can mention that you had heard me on KPFK with Michael, and I can friend you back, and you can see what I post. I'm very regular and do a lot of posts and comments on that. I'm currently working on a book called Talking to Myself, 2 words, myself, and the subtitle is A Dialogue with Only One Voice. Because, consciousness has only one voice, but it's coming out of many different mouths. But it's the same one voice. Sounds different, has different intonations and accents, but it's only one voice because there's only one consciousness. And you are that. You are that.
That's great. I've asked myself many times, who am I talking to when I talk to myself? And for that matter, who's answering? Yeah. And it seems to be a number of guys in my head that, in fact, they argue with each other. So I know there's division up there. Chuck Hillig, my guest. Thank you, Chuck. Be well. And thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. And I look forward to our next show, maybe a year or so from now. How's that?
That sounds great, Michael. Thanks again for inviting me. Appreciate it so much.
You're very welcome. Chuck Hillig, my guest on KPFK today, chuckhillig.com. And we'll be back with a few final words right after this. Stay with us. You're listening to the Ageless Wisdom Mystery School on KPFK in Los Angeles. And welcome back to the Ageless Wisdom Mystery School. Hope you enjoyed that interview. I bet you did. Chuck is pretty incredible guest, one of my favorite guests, and I like to have him on about once a year. I want to remind you in the few minutes we have remaining, I've got maybe 5 minutes here, the importance of you making some sort of contribution to KPFK. $25 a year makes you a member. Now, there's nobody that is unable to afford $25 a year, and that means that you're a contributor. It means you're a family member. It means you're anteing up a little bit, even if you're unemployed or a student or a senior on fixed income. You can still know the pride of making a contribution at an appropriate, affordable level, right? Now, if you're in a better position financially and you can make a contribution of $10 or $15 a month, $25 a month, that's a significant contribution. $10 a month is $120 a year. Double that to $20 a month, that's $240 a year. $20 a month, I don't think you're even going to miss. And we have people that make really much larger contributions than that. But it's not how much you donate or contribute to this tax-deductible nonprofit organization. It's that you are a contributor. 9 out of 10 people that listen to this radio station never contribute a nickel. I contribute every month to this radio station. I do this program for free. I donate all of my time. So do virtually all of the other hosts and staff members. We have a few people that have to be paid because they're here every single day. And of course, there are bills that need to be paid. But even those who are employed by KPFK are making a sacrifice by being here. They do it like And the reason a teacher is a teacher, they don't do it for the money. KPFK staff, they work here because, like a nurse, a fireman or many other professions, you're never going to get rich doing it. So why do people choose to do it? Because they know they're making a positive difference. And so you're busy and you've got a job, you're going to school. You can't drive to KPFK. There's not much else you can do in terms of contributing your time or your efforts, but you still want to be a part of the family. Well, how about going right now to kpfk.org, look for Sustainers Circle, and make a contribution of $20 or $25 a month, or more if you're able, or less if that feels appropriate. But do something. Make some sort of contribution. Are there thank you gifts? Are there premiums? Yeah. Poke around. You'll find them. I'm not even going to waste your time running them all down. Fortunately, other hosts will do that. Thank you for telling us the details about all the wonderful premiums you can take home. My emphasis in this program, a show about consciousness every week, is that you join the family, that you make some sort of contribution to help us stay on the air, to pay the light bill, and help us avoid ever having to take corporate grants, much less commercials. These are tough times. We're in dire straits, and this is not a threat. But to stay on the air, we could be like NPR and accept underwriting from corporations. There's talk of that. I would hate to see that happen, because it's a slippery slope then to some sort of editorial influence and control. Right now, we're all free from that. Nobody's going to kick in my door and tell me what I can say about war, about poverty, about human rights, and about the awareness that leads to elevated ethics and morality and a rejection of the gross injustices in this world. Would not want that, would we? So help out, won't you? 818-985-5735 if you want to call the phone room. Problem is that we've contracted that out during COVID. Hopefully we can restart the phone rooms soon. So sometimes it's a little confusing to call the phone room, but you can right now, 818-985-5735. I just suggest you go to the website, kpfk.org, and in 3 minutes you can make a contribution. You can look over the premium thank you gifts if you'd like, and wham, bam, Bob's your uncle. It's that easy, okay? kpfk.org. Thank you so much. Thank you. Join us next week and every Tuesday afternoon at 1 o'clock for The Ageless Wisdom. You can hear this program streaming on its website, theagelesswisdom.com. You can also learn more about me at michaelbenner.com. And as always, be gentle, love life, and take care of each other. From Los Angeles, this is Michael Benner on KPFK.